Hello and welcome to the Beauty Chronicles. I'm Meredith Jones, a professor of gender studies and a lover of pop culture.
And I'm Carla, Meredith's trusty sidekick.
Together, we dive into the fascinating world of beauty, exploring everything from handbags and cosmetic surgery to body horror and cultural identity. So whether you're here for the deep dive analysis or just to enjoy a thought-provoking chat, you're in great company.
So, Meredith.
Well, Carla, nice to see you.
Nice to see you too.
I met someone the other day and they said to me, "Oh, I thought you'd be bigger." And I often get that. I get people meeting me. They've only met me on screen. And then they say, "Oh, I thought you'd be bigger." And I don't know whether they mean taller or wider or have a big, I don't know, but
in physical size.
Yeah. So that's what we're talking about today is size, specifically tall women. So we've got a lot to get through.
Maybe even giant women.
Giant women for sure.
Giantly tall women.
Tall and giant women. Two different things that can be the same, but also can be different. So we've got stuff about mythical giantesses or women giants, little bit of scholarship. There's really not a lot written about the actual experiences of tall women, but I found an excellent master's dissertation written in Florida about that. So I've got a bit of that. We're going to talk about films, of course, and we're going to talk about Taylor Swift. Lots of our listeners will already be thinking about the Taylor videos that they know of where she gets really giant. We're going to talk about sexual fetish because, of course, everything in the world has some sort of sexual fetish attached to it. And giant women is no exception.
Yeah, especially things about size.
Yes. TV we'll talk about. High heels, of course, especially platform heels. Famous women taller than their partners. A few of them. Trans women, it's really important to talk about. And the medicalisation of tallness, which was a thing and quite distressing for me to read about, but very, very interesting. So I don't know, where do you want to start, Carla? Any of those things?
Well, maybe what you mean by big/tall women and
yes.
why it's interesting to you.
Sure. Well, I'm a very small woman. I think as I've said before on this podcast, I'm 4'10.5". When you've got the half, as Tom Cruise knows, the half is really important because he's 5'7.5". Pretends to be 5'8", of course. So I'm a very small woman. I have tall women friends. My definition of a tall woman for the purposes of this podcast is 6 foot and over. So, or as we'll see, maybe just people's perception of them is they're taller than 6 foot. And, well, the way, as you know, we began thinking about this podcast in terms of women bodybuilders. We wanted to do women bodybuilders, and we could still do that in future, but thinking it was going to be that, I went off and watched the film Love Lies Bleeding, which is a 2024 film directed by Rose Glass, starring the very famous Kristen Stewart, originally of Twilight fame, and Katie O'Brien. And I know you've seen the film as well, Carla, but what we know is that film is about a bodybuilder. So Katie O'Brien, who plays a character called Jackie, is a bodybuilder who begins to take steroids or inject steroids. And
was it when you watched that film that you decided to segue into talking about something different? Because I also watched the film on the back of the fact that we were going to talk about bodybuilding women, and you had sent me a bunch of links of videos to watch. And so I watched those ones about female bodybuilders on YouTube. And also because I'd seen the trailer of Love Lies Bleeding and it looked like some kind of um, angsty drama about female bodybuilders fighting for recognition and facing discrimination, and also stuff maybe about sexuality in there as well. And I thought it was going to be like some sort of, uh, you know, leso, bio, queer rights flick in the vein of Boys Don't Cry or something. And I didn't want to watch it because I was just like, "Oh, I don't want to see women getting abused because they want to be strong or they want to be gay." And that's kind of how I mean, it was weird when the film started because it has that kind of weird sort of slightly Lynchian drone shot of a canyon that seems a bit surreal and, you know, magical real. And I was like, oh, okay, maybe this isn't what? Maybe this
Yeah.
isn't going to be some, social realism, hard hitting.
And that
But
shot really makes sense by
oh,
the end, doesn't it?
once
Yeah.
you've watched the film bit, you're like, oh, okay, this is what's happening here. And yeah, it ends up being not a film about any of that, but just this kind of weird, oh, I think you're frozen. Hold on, we're frozen.
Now, come back.
Here we go.
Oh, God.
We're back. So yeah, so it make that canyon shot make sense as you watch the film, but
So
it
do you
just ends
want
up
to
being something
do,
totally not. It just ends up being a kind of horror movie, and or like it's just not. It doesn't care. It doesn't care about the sexuality. It doesn't care about the bodybuilding. It's just a sort of story about a girl trying to escape her crazy dad. It's very
I was,
coherent, but I think also the trailer made it, I think they were trying to sell the movie to a queer audience because they realized they wouldn't be able to sell it to a different audience. It was the only shot they had at getting any kind of audience for the film. Sort
I
of off the back of
really,
Kristen Stewart's, you know,
queerness.
popularity in that, she was pretty annoying. Anyway, it was a bit of a stupid film, to be honest.
Well, I loved it. Um,
Really?
yes, and I was shocked to see it described as horror or even as also someone described it as a thriller. I thought it was a beautiful, surreal, crazy trip that really was very poetic, actually.
Yeah. Yeah.
So for me, the place it really the place where I really began to feel like that was right at the end. So we're going to give some spoilers, which is that this bodybuilder has a whole lot of hardship. So does Lou, who's played by Kristen Stewart. Um, Lou has a father also called Lou Senior, and he's played by Ed Harris, with possibly the most wonderfully, disgustingly ugly hairstyle I've ever seen.
That should have been the clue. When I saw his hairstyle, I was like, okay, this is not social realism because should have been a total, clue that this film is not going to go where I think it might have
Where
been
you
going.
thought it would. See, I didn't have a clue what
You
to
hadn't seen the
expect.
trailer.
No, I hadn't seen the trailer.
Watch the trailer.
Oh,
Makes it look
dear.
like such a different movie.
What a shame. Anyway, so he attacks young Lou and stabs her. And at that point, Jackie hears Lou's cries of pain, possibly as Lou is dying, although that's not clear. And Jackie hulks up. She's already been on roids, right?
Mm.
And she bursts out of her clothes. She
It's like
hulks
the
up
Hulk.
this enormous emotion, this anger at hearing her lover being killed or attacked. And but it's not just hulking up, she also becomes giant. She's 50 feet high at least.
Mm.
Um, and she then goes and, ends the attack, picks Jackie up in her hand in a very loving way. But the final scene that we see is actually, I'm not sure if it's the final scene, but close to the end. The two of them, both giants, running through this beautiful, starry nightscape, almost with a sort of aurora borealis in the sky with, I think, their heads above the clouds. Can't quite remember.
Almost, almost like a Taylor Swift music video.
Almost like that colour, yes.
Yeah.
So what came first, Taylor Swift or Love Lies Bleeding? So
Taylor.
Yeah. So
Well, I mean,
we'll
maybe
get
they
to
both,
Taylor in a sec, but
given how long it takes to make films, they could have happened sort of
oh
around the
yeah,
same time. But
yeah, that's true. Well, the thing is, it's a bit zeitgeisty. So Giant Women is a bit zeitgeisty at the moment. So we've got Love Lies Bleeding. Then we've got another film called Tuesday.
oh, I
That's
didn't watch that.
so fantastic. It stars Julia Louis-Dreyfus as Zora and Lola Pettigrew as her daughter, who's called Tuesday. Lola has a terminal illness, and Zora cannot begin to accept that this is happening. So death comes a knocking, but death is in the form of a parrot or a macaw, I think, a speaking parrot. And so it's again a surreal film that I found very poetic and really quite beautiful. Um,
Is the parrot giant?
the parrot goes in back and forth from being all sorts of sizes. The
Mm.
parrot can be parrot size, human size, giant size.
Mm.
So that's really interesting. Zora is so distressed by the thought of her daughter's death that she ends up killing death. She kills the parrot and
Mm.
eats the parrot.
Mm.
And she then becomes death.
Becomes a parrot.
No, she stays as Julia Louis-Dreyfus,
Oh, okay, but she becomes death.
but she is death personified. She's the one who can tap you on the shoulder and end your suffering.
Mm.
And at certain points, she's absolutely enormous,
Mm.
striding through this landscape, head in the clouds, as
Mm.
huge as could be. So, what I really loved about those two films and about the Taylor Swift videos that we'll talk about in a sec is that none of them feature, they're all about women's relationships, right? Either women as lovers, women as friends, women as best friends of themselves, mother-daughter relationships, etc. So, it is still so rare to have films or videos that are about women communicating with women. And I think it's really interesting that this set of texts is doing that partly through this trope of gigantism.
Mm.
Yeah. So, and the gigantism is caused, at least in the films, maybe less so in the Taylor videos, it's caused by extreme emotion and also by connections to death and dying.
Mm.
So there's something about that tension between rapid, huge, almost monstrous growth and death that we're thinking about in this culture. So do you want to talk about Taylor? You watched Anti-Hero, didn't you?
Well, I remembered the anti-hero video because I remembered she was giant in it.
Yeah, she says, sometimes I feel like everybody is a sexy baby and I'm a monster on the hill. And she sings that as she's this giant Taylor crawling to get through the door. She has to literally crawl through the door of the room that her friends are in, and they're all kind of the size of her shin, that sort of size. So it's very Alice in Wonderland with Taylor in this tiny house or normal sized house, and she's huge. She drinks from a tiny bottle, she eats with a tiny fork, very Alice in Wonderland. But by the end, there are three Taylors. There's the kind of, let's say, a kind of homebody Taylor. Then there's the glamorous Taylor, who's a
The
little bit like,
party Taylor, one who
yeah,
likes to party.
yeah. And then
Her
there's a
sort of bad
in,
alter ego.
in between Taylor. Well, I thought maybe they were ego and super ego, but if you want to get Freudian, it resolves with two of them sitting on a roof and they're normal size, and then
Mm.
along comes another one who's giant, and all of them together actually
Have a drink
stand
of
there.
wine.
They're
Have some
drinking
wine.
red wine, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm not so interested in Taylor Swift, but I'm really interested in her fans. And I
Hmm.
wondered what it means for teenage girls growing up today to see their hero, their heroine, Taylor Swift, enormous and and still struggling, obviously struggling, singing about a struggle, but enormous you know, and being with herself, being with two other versions of herself.
Mm.
So I thought that was a very, very kind of positive thing for teenage girls to see.
Yeah. Did you go to her era's concert? I don't imagine you did if you're not a fan, but did you watch any of it? Because it's
No.
available. So it's interesting. I mean, I think most rock concerts are probably pretty similar, but she spends a lot of time on stage on her own. You don't always see her band. And there's all of these screens, projection screens, and also the stage as well, which kind of has a long walkway down in the middle where she can kind of walk out into the crowd. That also is a screen or a large series of screens. And so she's often like, because there's screens that project what's happening on the stage around the stadiums, she's huge. She's like huge projection on the screen. So a lot of the concert is, I imagine if you're there, you're mainly looking at a screen of her giant
Yeah,
face
fantastic.
body.
So this video is in many ways actually reflecting the real life experience of a Taylor concert, where
Mm,
sometimes she's tiny,
mm,
sometimes she's enormous, and you can have it all happening.
yeah.
Yeah, amazing. The
And
other
it's
video,
I think it's also the fact she's so successful, the fact that she transforms economies when she visits cities and such.
yeah,
Um,
and the word for successful is huge.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Right? She's
So
huge. The
yeah.
other video that she's huge in is called Karma, and it's a video she made with Ice Spice, whose real name is Isis, but she had to change it to Ice because, of course, you're not allowed to use that. You can't. So that's just an aside. Yeah, she and Ice Spice sing about karma, about how they've got good karma and nothing to worry about. And so they basically go to heaven. You know, they mount these stairs. They're both enormous. Then they're in the clouds, and then they both become very much like mythical ancient goddesses with Taylor as an actual landscape. So she is a mountain and a forest lying
Like
down.
lying on her side,
Yes,
covered in trees,
that's right.
the
And
face,
with
yeah, peeking out.
Ice Spice as a kind of more ethereal goddess in the clouds with her hair as an actual cloud, which looks absolutely amazing. So I think it's interesting that they are drawing on myths of giantesses or women giants there, especially because most of the myths that I looked at, women giants don't live with men. And of course, the most famous ones are the Amazons. You know, most famously, they were reportedly huge, at least for their time, and reportedly didn't live with men. So there's something about gigantism and depicting women as giant that really is separate somehow to men's cultures and has been for a very, very long time. I want to tell you about this crazy myth that I found. Like most of the myths were pretty stuff everyone knows, right? But I found this myth of a giantess who's Turkish, and she's
Hmm.
called the giant mother or the Dev Anasi. So she's a common folkloric figure in Turkish myth. And in the stories about her, a man is supposed to drink her milk, her breast milk, without being noticed, to kind of steal her breast milk. And this is a way for him to then become her metaphoric child so that she won't attack him.
Mm.
It really reminded me of the giantess in Jeanette Winterson's book called Sexing the Cherry. So and I went and found the passage, an amazing fruit has come to London, a couple of 100 years ago. It's actually a banana, and it's going to be on display, but she hasn't seen it yet. And the narrator writes, I told Johnson that if he didn't throw back his cloth and let us see this wonder, that's the banana, by the way, I'd cram his face so hard into my breasts that he'd wish he'd never been suckled by a woman. So truly would I smother him. And she's a huge woman. It's not clear how tall she is, but she's unnaturally tall, let's say, in that in that book, and indeed has a clitoris the size of an orange.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, so she must be pretty big.
That's wishful thinking.
Yeah, yeah. There are also giantesses in Hinduism who, there's one in particular called Putana. She's actually a demoness, and she attempts to kill baby Krishna with poisoned milk from her breasts. So something, again, very Kleinian, Freudian there about good breast, bad breast, giant women and their giant breasts. And of course, I guess our mothers, when we're babies, our mothers are giants to us with enormous, enormous breasts. Yeah, so I think that kind of leads us a little bit naturally to giant women as a fetish. So the fetish is called macrophilia. Yeah, of course. And apparently it hit an all-time high in terms of internet searches in 2023. Go figure, at least according to Pornhub statistics. It was the most searched for fetish of 2023. On TikTok, you can find some quite extraordinary little vignettes by someone called Mummy Giant and someone called Giant Missy. And they're either made with AI or made with very careful angling and just standard kind of filmmaking tricks. Where there are these giant women who usually step on a tiny man, right? That's a very common kind of, let's call it the money shot, right? Is they step on a tiny man who may or may not have been trying to run away. But sometimes they'll pick him up and say things like, I like you this tiny, now you're mine. And then sort of cradle him he's about the size of a Barbie doll compared to a normal human. So it's really, really fascinating, these miniature men and enormous women on TikTok.
Why 2023?
No idea, but I think that we are in a period where women's and men's sizes are very worrying for a lot of people. I think that's partly to do with the current epidemic of transphobia. I think it's to do with incels, and it's connected to, women seeming, men having a perception that women are very, very powerful. And wherever there's a fear, there's going to be a fetish. Yeah, so I mean, enormous women are definitely part of our current sexual symbolic imaginary, if you like, and a huge woman who actually just steps on you either accidentally or on purpose is kind of the ultimate dominatrix, isn't she? It's actually connected to another fetish, which is called formicophilia, which is either a desire to be very tiny or a desire to be an actual bug and to live your life in service of, for example, the queen bee.
Okay.
Yeah. So there you go. I'll read you out a little bit from someone on Reddit I found. This is from a 30-year-old male. Ever since I was 10, I've been obsessed with giant women. I want giant women to dominate me. My most common fantasy involves being tiny, 2 centimetres, being owned by a woman who treats me like a pet and who demands to be worshipped and treated like a goddess. Sometimes when I'm bored and looking out a window, I'll imagine a woman I like stomping her way down the street at the height of 100 feet in amazing shoes with the self-assured confidence of a supermodel.
Could this be a kind of sign that actually there is a hunger for women? Like, is there a reason people want women to be bigger and to have more power? And that's why they fantasize about it. It's not a fear necessarily.
Yeah, I think that the fear and the desire are connected, as fear of something and desire for the same thing are always connected.
Like deep down, people know that the only thing that's going to save us are powerful, sensible women.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Or if we see something beginning to go missing from our culture, so things like cultural and social movements like, say, tradwives, movements where women are diminished in every way, shape, and form, leave people wanting. And so we fill that gap with something bigger than reality.
You know, that's why Taylor Swift fans like her seeing her big. It's not because they're scared.
Absolutely, but I'm talking about the whole culture. I'm not, and many people are scared of Taylor, of what she represents. Let's talk about some real women. So as I said, there's not a lot of scholarship. I mean, of course, Taylor Swift is a real woman, but there's not a lot of scholarship around the actual experiences of very tall women. But I did find a nice dissertation written by Elizabeth Joy Fuller in 2017 for a master's course. And what she really found was that tall women in popular culture, for example, Wonder Woman and Xena, are desirable. But in real life, it's another matter. So she interviewed women from 18 to 72 years of age, from 5'11" to 6'3". And she found that really there were some positives to being tall, especially in the workplace. So one woman told her, I've noticed in my work that height gives me a lot of power. When I have to do presentations, my supervisors feel they're not in power. I stand up and feel the dynamics shifting as they see my height. So that's a positive. But then many negatives that these women reported, such as simply their tallness is constantly called to attention. It's constantly commented on, and that gets very tiresome. Every single one of them had been bullied as a child or a teenager because of her height. Those of them who were heterosexual said it was very difficult to find a partner, but the homosexual ones had no problems.
Obviously.
Yeah.
Did she interview basketball players?
No, but what a lot of them did report, one of the negatives, was that there's a cultural assumption that if you're tall, you've played basketball and or you are very athletic, and that this is simply just because someone's 6'3" doesn't mean she's any more physically talented or gifted than anyone of any height. But there's always that assumption.
She's just a bit closer to the hoop.
Yeah.
To the basket.
Yeah. They also reported a lot of pain because, of course, our environments are created for an average sized body. And sitting on planes, sitting in cars, all that sort of thing can be very painful for tall people. But the really interesting stuff was around femininity. So one of them said really quite hilariously to her, she said, femininity is like the elephant in the room next to my giraffe. Isn't that good? They reported having to limit themselves in terms of how they took up space. So making themselves smaller in all sorts of ways, from stooping to keeping their legs crossed to never moving their arms about very much. And one of them said, I guess you have to act super cute and be girly in order to be normal. So it's a real compensation that a lot of tall women feel they have to have. This doesn't come out of nowhere. We actually have a long history of not just making tall women feel like second-class citizens in some ways, but of actually trying to alter them physically. So this was something really horrifying I looked at, the medicalisation of tallness. This was a hormonal treatment done with estrogens and testosterons, mainly between the 1950s and the 1990s.
To make women shorter.
To make girls who appeared to be growing to some sort of height that was meant to be undesirable, to stunt their growth with hormones.
How did the hormones stunt the growth? Just out of curiosity.
I don't know. You'd have to ask an endocrinologist, but they do. You can use these hormones in different combinations. They were pills, some were pellets inserted under the skin of these girls. I don't know how it works, but it does stunt growth. It also, though, impairs fertility, probably adds to experience of major depression later in life, and is connected to cervical cancer in the daughters of these women.
Who were treated with hormones.
The women who were treated with hormones had daughters who were more likely to get cervical cancer.
Okay.
And this was very standard. If you looked like you were going to be 5'10" or over, you could easily be offered this sort of treatment. It was at its height probably in the early 1970s. And interestingly, in 1969, there was a children's book published called, a picture book called The Very Tall Little Girl. And I think it was probably a radical book for its time. 1969, a very sweet little children's picture book by Phyllis Krasilovsky. And in this book, The Very Tall Little Girl is taller than her friends whom she liked to hug. And then there's a picture of her friends all looking a bit squished and bewildered by this much bigger friend. And then the book says, even though, this is in school plays, even though in school plays she wasn't a bunny or a kitten or an elf, she could be a beautiful sunflower, a funny giraffe, or the wife of a brave giant. Okay, you can hear me vomiting. Nevertheless, it was a book trying to make it okay to be tall, even though your only option is to marry a brave giant.
I would love to be taller. I would love to be taller.
Would you like to be 6 foot?
Yeah. Yeah. I'd be happy if I was 7 foot. I mean, that would sort of probably be a little more awkward, but yeah, I'm happy to be 6 foot. See over everyone at concerts, tower over people.
Head above the clouds.
Yeah, I'd love to be taller.
It's going to be you and Taylor.
I think I'm taller than I am. I'm not short, but I do think I'm taller than I am.
I'm very, very aware of my height.
Yeah.
I never think I'm taller or shorter. Very aware.
Mm.
Yeah. So, it's an interesting cultural moment there in the 70s where we've got a whole lot of girls being treated for their tallness and then a beginning of a pushback against it. And it now is a very uncommon thing as far as I could tell from my reading. The treatment is no longer
Administered.
Yeah. Yeah.
I remember a Happy Days episode where Richie dates a woman who's taller than him, and it's a bit of a crisis of the episode.
Wow.
I don't know if he meets her at a Halloween party where she's dressed as a Statue of Liberty and so doesn't realize how tall she is or something. There's something to do with the Statue of Liberty, who is also a tall woman.
Indeed. Indeed. Well, there are, of course, some famous women who are taller than their partners. Nicole Kidman, famously, often photographed when she was married.
This is only because they have short husbands.
Well,
not because they're particularly tall.
Well, Nicole Kidman says she's 5'11", but apparently she's 6 foot, and Tom Cruise says he's 5'8", but apparently he's 5'7". There are some halves going on there. The thing is that people were obsessed with their height difference, but probably the most famous couple, can you think? Shall I give you a clue?
Yes.
They're royals.
Oh.
One of them's dead.
Diana.
Charles and Diana, yeah.
Really?
Yeah. So
she used to hunch over quite a bit, didn't she?
Absolutely, yeah. So people really understood and pictured Diana as a very tall, slender, willowy, next to Charles, who was shorter. That's our cultural perception of them as a couple. In fact, they were the exact same height. They were both, well, he still is, 5'10". I think it's really significant, though, that we saw her as taller than him. And interestingly, when she was alive, her tallness was seen, I think, understood as part of her difference, part of her vulnerability, part of her somehow being better than this family that she'd married into because of her otherness. her tallness was one of her vulnerabilities, and her vulnerabilities were the reason that she was so loved. So I think the media actually began it because when during their engagement photo shoot, the media pack put Charles on a step. So people's first vision of this couple was of him being a good 5, 6 inches taller than her. Then, of course, when they began to see all the millions, literally millions of other photos of them that came out over the years, it was always in context of this original deceptive shot. And so people then, I think, have always thought of her as being taller than him, and which of course she was whenever she put high heels on, right?
Mhm.
But actually, they were the same height. Now, in the series The Crown, Princess Diana is played by Elizabeth Debicki, who is 6'3", and Charles is played by Dominic West, who is 6 foot. So, isn't it interesting that the casting director very carefully chose someone who was going to be much taller? And then, of course, with her heels on, she'll be a good 6 inches taller than him. So I think there was a moment there where tallness was very connected to femininity and vulnerability and authenticity through this figure of Diana. And that idea of tallness and authenticity then made me think about the persecution of trans women who are violently outed sometimes by way of their tallness. So one of the violences that our culture perpetuates against trans people, but especially against trans women, is this kind of sick pride in being able to spot one, right? And whether you then, you're the one with the know-how, you're the one with the knowledge, you're the one with the visual literacy, you can tell when she's, not a real woman. That leads to all sorts of violences, including murder of trans women. But interestingly, it also leads to cis women
Being
getting in
murdered
trouble, if
because
you
they look a
like.
bit too trans.
Exactly. So I went onto this Reddit group called Tall Girls, and on that group, a trans woman asked other people, she asked whether cis women who are tall suffer from transphobia.
Mm.
And here's some of the answers that she got. Of course, so these are all from cis women, right? Of course, I always get the sir and you startled me. People are just shitty and ignorant. Yes, I'm a sir. That's why I have a massive pair of tits. Idiots. Love that.
Oh my
And
God.
then someone said, I'm cis and I've had this comment. You pass very well. Didn't even have to say anything back. I was just flabbergasted. In what world is that okay to say that to anyone?
God.
Yeah.
So
So,
people are so obsessed. They're so obsessed with this whole trans thing. It is just bizarre.
yeah, maybe we need to do another whole episode just about trans beauty. It'd be a hell of a lot to say about it. Yeah. Well, I want to talk about high heels as well, because of
Okay.
course, as a person with a
Short
height
person.
with a height
Yeah.
challenge myself, I love nothing more than a comfortable platform. If I can find a platform that's comfortable enough to wear, then I'm really, really happy.
Mm.
But platforms probably originated, well, we don't know when, but they got very famous as this shoe called a Chopin, spelt
Mm.
Chopin, but pronounced Chopin, which were worn by Venetian. So they're almost stilts. The highest pair that still exist are 20 inches high.
Wow.
Yeah, made of wood.
Hmm.
So you would, and they were very, very luscious. So they could be covered in velvet, silk, lace, and they were a status symbol.
Did they make them in Venice because sometimes Venice would flood and you need to
Absolutely.
walk through the puddles?
Yeah, so they began as a practical thing to get through the puddles and were just a few inches high, but then, became a status symbol and, got higher and higher and higher. to the point of the 20-inch ones, these women couldn't walk without a couple of assistants, which of course added to their status because they had to have assistants, you know. They
Is this
had,
at the same time that those big wigs and hairdos were popular?
yes, Chopins were worn in the 15th through to the 17th centuries. So just like a lot of shoes that you might wear now that are not walkable shoes, like nowadays they're often called taxi shoes or bedroom shoes. These were attendant shoes. You know, you need a couple of attendants to help you get around. And part of the status, sometimes the shoe itself was revealed as its own status symbol, but sometimes it was covered, would have been very obvious someone was wearing them. Sometimes they were covered with a very, very long gown, and that again was more of a status symbol because of the extra fabric needed, extra expensive fabric. Now, there's this kind of, I don't know if it's an urban myth or what, that I've read many, many times, that heel heights, especially with platform shoes rather than stilettos, go up when the economy goes down. So stocks fall, heels rise. I have
Who
not.
told you that?
This is the thing. I can't find anything to actually line it up, and it would be easy enough to get the stats and work it out. Like,
But where did you hear that to begin with?
probably I've read it in fashion exhibition catalogues,
Okay.
that sort of place. But we do know that wearing a platform is an easy way to kind of elevate a look.
Yeah.
And the other myth kind of connected to this is that in times of boom, men's ties get wider, and in times of recession, their ties get narrower. And in times of depression and recession, there are more red lipstick sales. Red lipstick is a cheap and easy way to look suddenly fancy.
Right.
Right? I mean, the logic makes sense, but whether the stats are there to back these things up, I don't know. But there is at least this myth that in times of economic downfall, women's heels get higher.
Okay.
Yeah. So the first pair of platform heels were made, you know, in the modern sense of them, were designed by Salvatore Ferragamo, and it's still in production. It's this famous rainbow platform, was designed in 1938 for Judy Garland, and it's still made today. It's got a gold sandal, then the heel or the base is in rainbow colours of suede. It's about 9 centimetres high. Platform shoes are a kind of sign of feminine rebellion or gender rebellion often. So think of David Bowie wearing them and his gender bending. Think of the Spice Girls. Think of goths who are often very androgynous, all towering in the highest platforms that they can actually get around in, right? To me, the most fascinating people wearing platforms at the moment are Rick Owens, but more specifically, Michelle Lamy. So Michelle Lamy and Rick Owens are married, and she does a million and one things. She's a real polymath. But one of the things she does is she runs the design company called Rick Owens with him, and they're married, by the way. They both wear enormously high platforms. Often his have perspex heels and hers are more a kind of big fitted leather boot. And after the fall winter catwalk for 2025, she was interviewed about the music for the show, which had been David Bowie, We Can Be Heroes, right? And in that interview, she said, and I can't do her accent, she's got a fabulous accent, but she said, when you listen to the music, it's we should be heroes. We should be heroes. What I like is that we do shows right now, even if the times are so difficult, because we show that we stand up. And so she's really saying something political about our moment. And she is a deeply political person, but she's expressing it, you know, via the platform heel via using David Bowie on the catwalk as the background music, and by saying we should all be heroes. And one of the ways we can feel like heroes is to feel tall, is to put those tall things on. I want to talk about a hero that a lot of people mentioned to me. Almost everyone who I told about this podcast mentioned this character to me, Brienne of Tarth in Game of Thrones series. Yeah. Played by Gwendoline Christie, who is 6'3". Again, I found a lovely master's dissertation about this, written by Brietta O'Leary in 2016. So a lot of this thinking is from that master's dissertation. Thank you very much, Brietta. So Brienne of Tarth is a very large fighter. She's a warrior and she's incredibly strong. She's described as very ugly in the book. You know, she has broken, crooked teeth. She's typically kind of trolly and ugly. But of course, Gwendoline Christie, the actor, is not ugly. She's extremely beautiful by today's standards.
Yeah, and in the show, her character's quite handsome, really.
Yes, although she's continually described by male characters as ugly and as unattractive. But to the fans, she's something different. So what this thesis I read said was that she's beloved by fans, but not loved in context of the show, in context of the plot, which is very, very interesting. This is the character suffers routine taunting in almost every social interaction.
But she comes up really well from memory. Like she ends up.
That's you as a fan.
No, the story. She's kind of depicted as this very loyal hero.
Well, maybe it changed. So this dissertation was published 2016. Maybe it was not, the series wasn't, I don't know how many series were out then.
I guess. Well, the actress was nominated for an Emmy Award in 2019.
Okay, so I think this dissertation was written before the final series. And what O'Leary says is that writing about Brienne means examining a narrative of degradation that also situates her within a tradition of female action heroes. So we've got this female action hero who's brave, as you say, strong, noble, but is also suffers terrible degradation in context of the show. You know, the most she's tortured by being put in a pink dress into a bear pit and made to fight a bear who is bigger than her. So never mind the torture of the poor bear, but also torture of her in this way. And that scene apparently is one of the very, very few where Gwendoline Christie is shot from above. In almost every other shot, she's shot from below to make her look bigger than she is. It's a very typical way to make someone look bigger than they are. So that's a fascinating giant woman in it, very much at the forefront of our cultural imaginary. You know, as I said, almost everyone mentioned her to me, but I'm really interested in the actor, Gwendoline Christie, because since then, to me, I don't know what else she's been in since then. I'm sure she's a superstar, but I was astounded by this entire fashion show by John Galliano, and part of this incredible ensemble cast that he put together was that it included her. It included Gwendoline Christie. So this was the 2024 spring-summer reveal of the Maison Margiela John Galliano show. And it's a really extraordinary show that you can watch the whole thing on YouTube. And in fact, I think we could do a whole podcast about that show because there's so much in it. But Christie closed the show, and that's a sign of high status for a fashion show. If you get to close it, you're the last person walking. And her brief from Galliano was that she was a broken doll who'd fallen into the Seine, fallen into the Paris Seine, and she'd been dragged out and she was still half wet and was sort of staggering around. And what she said about that was she said, that show for many of us was rebirth, certainly for me. It was something I'd wanted to do for 30 years. My idol told me I was beautiful and I could believe him. And then she says directly to Galliano in a different interview, with great compassion and love, you were able to see into the heart of me. And I'm not sure I've ever been treated so beautifully and so celebratory in my entire life.
Mm.
And that really, really touched me. Here is a huge woman. She's not just tall, she's also broad and big. And something about being in that fashion show made her seen, even though she's had all of this public attention, that made her feel seen more than she ever had been before.
She's quite a lot taller than him as well. I don't know if he's pretty short.
You're looking at the photo of them in the lift, I think.
Yeah, in
Yes.
Vogue. And she's, gosh, a good, I don't know.
Is she in heels as well?
Oh, yeah, she might have some heels on. They don't look super tall.
I think he's little.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
but
she's
that's a
like
beautiful shot,
half a
isn't
meter
it?
taller than him.
But they look like equals, don't they? It's
Yeah.
a beautiful shot because it's
Yeah.
about them making art together.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, love Brienne. How are we going to finish?
What about Attack of the 50-foot woman? That 40 foot or 50 foot?
No, 50 foot. 50 foot.
Because she's actually not a single woman.
No.
Isn't she
no,
kind
but
of
she does.
traipsing through the desert and these sort of innocent little towns trying to find a runaway husband
Well,
or something? I only watched a few YouTube
So
clips.
it's a 1958 movie. It's kind of science fiction, but I find the science fiction part of it much less interesting than the giant woman part of it. The way she becomes giant is that an alien does something to her, but we don't know what. She has this terrible husband who's a cheater, a gaslighter. He's already institutionalized her once. And he wants her money. She's very rich. When the aliens, he sees the aliens as well, but he runs away and she's left with the aliens. And then next thing he knows, she's enormous. The aliens were enormous too, right? And then she's kind of sedated by this extraordinary pair of caricatures, the family doctor, who's called Dr. Cushing, and then a specialist doctor that Dr. Cushing brings in, who's called Dr. Van Loeb, an unspecified specialist. But it seems pretty clear to me that Dr. Van Loeb is a 1950s version of Sigmund Freud, right down to the cigar, right down to the accent and the cigar smoking.
Interesting.
These two delightful characters between them decide that the best thing is to chain her up and put her into a morphine-induced coma. So they do that and they have this conversation where Dr. Cushing says, I've known Nancy since she was born. In those days, she was a beautiful child, fresh, young, full of the joys of life. But in the last few years after her marriage, she changed. Her health seemed to rise and fall with the tide of her emotions. To which Dr. Van Loeb replies, who knows, my friend? When women reach the age of maturity, Mother Nature sometimes overworks the frustration to the point of irrationalism. Like the middle-aged man of our age who finds himself looking longingly at the girl in her early 20s. Let's just keep in mind, like they're implying that she's menopausal, I assume.
No, she's sort of an adult and has hormones running around.
Okay, well, the actor was 28, right?
It does kind of slightly imply
when women reach the
age.
age of maturity, Mother Nature sometimes overworks the frustration to the point of irrationalism. And then how dare her, she gets a bit too big for her boots, and needs to be chained up and put into a morphine-induced coma. But guess what? She escapes and goes rampaging, kills her husband's lover and kills the husband too. And she dies, sadly, she dies from an electric shock from bringing down a power cable. So, yeah, that's Attack of the 50-Foot Woman.
I only watched a few clips on YouTube.
Mm.
I don't think it means menopause. Doesn't it just mean that she's hormonal? And
well,
like
look,
women are crazy with their hormones?
well,
Isn't it
she
that?
was no longer a beautiful child, fresh, young, full of the joys of life. Now she's gotten married. You know, she's ruined.
She's
Mother
ruined.
Nature has overworked the frustration to the point of irrationalism. But
Yeah.
actually, her problem is her husband's vile,
Yeah. Well,
and she's
yeah.
got two terrible male doctors, and all of them are gaslighting her,
Oh
right?
God. Yeah.
So she's perfectly within her rights to crush every one of them with her enormous foot. So I think really the thing I want to say about tall women is that in text and in representations, if not in real life as well, women's tallness is often a metaphor for feminine power and for cultural and social fears of women. Tall women are sometimes lauded in very specific ways, but they're more often vilified and punished. So it's the same old story of size matters. You've been listening to The Beauty Chronicles. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave us a review, and feel free to suggest ideas for future episodes. Until next time, keep on being beautiful.